see what Team Unknown throw right back at them. So coming up with bans looking like a possible Superman ban, which isn't surprising at all. And I would probably call something of a Zephyr's ban in retaliation.
Red team's turn to
Especially against
ban.
that Flash Beat.
Yep, Zephyr's
Blue
All Joker
team's
will
turn
be
to pick.
the primary ban right now, but then Unknown obviously going for the Joker.
Red
And
team's turn to pick.
NatusVanguard definitely will be picking up the Zephyrs for themselves. But with that, NatusVanguard actually, will have to go in for a comp that's not very comfortable with, like we were talking about yesterday. So they'll probably go for that Violet Slims combo like we saw yesterday. And for the side of Team Unknown, however, with that Zephyrs getting picked up, they picked up Azil and Lindis.
Yep, and there's the Violet you mentioned. I mean, the Zenial going alongside it is not a bad choice at all. We saw Zenial played to great success at yesterday's games, and just that top lane pressure as well as the global pressure he provides and the support capabilities for your team. It's just such a great top lane pick, in my opinion, and obviously in a lot of these pro teams' opinion, as it fits right in with the meta. Alongside that, we see picks like Praetor and Lumber, and looking over for the side of Team Unknown, they've gone with Vayne, L'Oreal, and Lindis. They're going to finish their team off with what looks like to be a Crash, and that isn't a bad idea at all. They do need a front line to go alongside that of Vayne, as well as some good CC to initiate with when it comes along to the ultimate, the metamorphosis coming out from that Crash.
All right, so quickly looking through the matchups that we saw, like you mentioned earlier on, Zephyr's Violet, Zenial, Praetor, and Lumber picked up by the side of NatusVanguard. As for the side of Team Unknown, we are seeing Zil, Lindis, L'Oreal, Crashed, and Thane. So with this matchup, coming through, I'm expecting a lot more early game pressure coming out from the side of Team Unknown, whereas for the side of NatusVanguard, they will have to wait for a little, but to let Violet scale, they do not have a Slims this time round. And with that in mind, it is quite telling that NatusVanguard from yesterday's matches and even the matches before that do not very good with a mid-late game. They just lose control after that. So picking out a comp like that, they really need to wait to scale. So if they can pull it off, I think they have a better looking team comp overall. I mean, they have Zephyrs for the early game to be able to just harass, if not then take down kills, try to snowball. They have Zenial that you said have the global presence with the healing and the shield. As for the side of Team Unknown, what do you personally think? I mean, they have a Zil, they have a Linda. Zil do not work very well in that early game. However, he has great damage in that late game.
Well, I think overall they've got good balance in their team comp. They've got the front line, as well as they're going to obviously have Lindis on the back line, possibly put in the mid or that of Zil. Either way, what way they go about it, I think that they have a decent team comp that when it comes to either roaming and patrolling, then they're going to have some good gank CC potential there to secure some early kills, or maybe even just starting to take control game. But we'll have to see how they play it out as we go into the first game of today between NatusVanguard and Team Unknown. So they are fighting for that third place spot. Still a lot on the line between these two teams, and we see at least for side of Natus looking for a possible invade, but I think they're going to play it safe. It's just going to be the Lumber out there patrolling, making sure there is no counter invade, and each team playing a fairly passive early game per se.
Yep, they are definitely going in for the more passive early game, as we see now Clash P on their Violet no longer holding that of the mid lane. Instead, will be going down into the bottom lane alongside Lumber. And I mean, Violet just does so well, just do so very well in that bot lane because of the amount of poke they can put up against that of Lindis. As we can see now, Clash P just putting up so much pressure in this early game up against Lindis and this Thane. And there's really nothing, the side of Team Unknown can do at this point in time except for wait, right? Lindis does well because of the vision that she provides to her team, but at the end of it all, the early game burst that Violet has, Lindis just has got no match whatsoever.
Yeah, now that is why I was assuming that maybe we'd see Belindis in the mid, but I completely forgot about the L'Oreal on that team. So it makes sense the way that decided to spread out their team comp. However, just looking at this overall, I really get the feeling NatusVanguard have picked up the bear team comp for themselves. And it's as you say, as long as they're going to be able to transition through the mid game into late, that's really where it's going to hold up for them. Especially, you mentioned Clash P on that Violet already doing a lot of work just up against that of the L'Oreal and the Thane, but it's going to be so much more important for them to get to that point in the late game where they can really be built up. We see the first Abyssal Dragon going over to NatusVanguard. No surprise there. They've never really been a team that's been behind on that. They've been on top of that, at least in terms of the early game.
Yep, and now we do see a
bit of an invade coming through from the side of NatusVanguard, but there's going to be retaliation coming through from Thane, and Zill jumping over the wall just for the escape. He will be caught out by Clash P for the first blood. Clash P continuing on, trying to land some damage onto the Cylinders. It's going to be the 1v1 trade out, but he misses the skill shots. Still winning it out, as you mentioned. There's really nothing that the L'Oreal can do against that. And just look at the range they have to poke the enemy from outside the turret range itself, and surely in a very comfortable position already, sitting at 6.5k over to 5.8, and will be happy to have got that first blood alongside the Abyssal Dragon.
Yep, and one interesting thing to note as well was that, before the Praetor was picked up, the side of Team Unknown actually prioritized. Wait, let me actually see whether they actually prioritize that or not. Yes, they actually prioritize L'Oreal over that of Praetor. And this is something, maybe they're just not very comfortable on that Praetor, and they do, prefer L'Oreal as a whole.
Well, we're going to see a bit of an engagement up here on the top lane. A bit of a gank, 2v1, nothing that can be done for Zenio. So that's a good trade-off for at least the side of Team Unknown to get that through. They might even get a fair bit of damage onto that top tower if there's no response, because right now we see a lot of attention down here in the bot side. There's going to be Lumber with the ultimate, game the knock-up, and Clash P trying to stay safe on that backline, game the damage through, but Lumber just eating up too much in the early game will go down as well. And so Team Unknown starting to kick back at least and have a bit of success there, especially with the timing they got on that. Abyssal Dragon is up now. However, it doesn't look like they're quite ready to go for it.
Yep, they may not be ready, but as bringing back to my point, as we see in this mid laning phase, that L'Oreal just clears lane much slower compared to, say, Praetor. So that is one thing that, usually when you look at team comps and you want to balance out the team comps in such a manner where, you have a fast clearer in one of the lanes, you have a slower clearer in another lane that you can basically give up, or pretty much the suicide lane. Whereas for what Unknown is doing right now is that they are just going for, heroes that they're more comfortable on, rather, and instead of actually trying to balance out the team comp as a whole.
Yeah, I get what you mean there, and that's probably why when we look at this, NatusVanguard definitely look like they have the bear team comp lined up for themselves overall. And it's just the way they've decided to pressure this one as well. Although Team Unknown were, I wouldn't say lucky to get those 2 kills to themselves, but definitely it's not really going to make that much of a difference because they could not get any objectives off the back of it. Abyssal Dragon was up, but they decided not to take the risk, and we'll see how that pays off for them now as a fight breaks out next to the Abyssal Dragon. Clash P going to be on that backline there, but Zill jumping right through to the enemy backline. He will get taken out by that Praetor who rotated down. And so many people on the side of Team Unknown are low, but they're going to take out the Lumber before it goes down. Praetor with the poke coming through is able to pick up another kill for himself. All the meanwhile, Clash P not even taking any damage himself, and it looks like Zephyr's still in that fight, able to pick up the final kill. In fact, the ace for the side of NatusVanguard, and they will be the ones to claim the Abyssal Dragon. So you just see how the dominance and the understanding of what they want in the early game is paying off for them, and how to play the early game. That I see this is a really possible match for NatusVanguard to carry on through, but it isn't the first time we've seen them do well and then let it fall.
Well, it's not the first time we see them do well, but never this well. Really, with their team comp, I said earlier on, with that, Violet usually very late scaling, but then with the Zephyrs and with the Praetor, when you actually pick those heroes out, what happens that your early game burst is just insane, right? You can just, like we saw in the previous team fight itself, just be able to just hold back in the back lines and just do plenty of damage without even, breaking a sweat. And that's the thing about, the team comp coming through from the side of NatusVanguard. It is just so very strong in terms of burst, right? DPS wise, obviously you have Lindis, and don't get me wrong. The team fight before the Abyssal Dragon take, it was a very, very good Valiant charge that came out from Thane. However, it was not good enough because, on the side of NatusVanguard, we are seeing just so much CC, and on top of that, so much burst coming through as well. Even Ashe, we saw Zil actually jumping into the back lines, trying to take out Ashe on the Zephyrs, but failed because of the lack of burst.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. They just weren't able to secure on any kills, and now we see that Zil diving in underneath that turret is able to pick up the kill, and that's a bit of a different situation for the side of Team Unknown. However, it is the question of how meaningful are these kills going to be, as the rest of, or half of NatusVanguard are going to rotate down to try get some return damage and defend that bomb tower, my bad.
Yeah, but now we do see Lindis actually coming back down to try to save or, be part of this team fight. And one of the heroes that we haven't quite talked about is actually You Lost, right? The Crash, that Metamorphosis then was a pretty good one, able to push Violet back, but that actually gives Violet so much more advantage in general, because pushing Violet back means that your team, it'll be difficult for your team to latch on to Violet and thus putting down the needed damage. And as you can tell, NatusVanguard is actually doing very well for themselves, actually taking the mid-tier turret already. And Team Unknown is really looking hard to soften this gold lead that, the side of Natus has. But we just have to wait till the mid-late game and see whether or not NatusVanguard can actually carry on, or the side of Unknown can find a team fight that will work for them.
Yep, well, we're very soon transitioning into that mid game, and it looks like Ashe on that of the Zephyrs is going to rotate down to the bot lane and try put some pressure down. Meanwhile, Clash P trading out with the Lindis and very well taking very minimal damage in return, but there's going to be the Zil to pick up the kill once again, and that's really what NatusVanguard have to focus on, making sure they peel for Clash P to get stay alive in those fights and get that damage down. But they are going to go for that third Abyssal Dragon. They will lose the top tower for it, but I definitely think it's worthwhile in this situation. As you mentioned, a bit of a suicide lane, that you have to make one lane the priority, and one will obviously lose out in this kind of situation. And you can see that focus very much being here on the bot lane. At least they're trying, but Cucks on that Thane doing a very good job of defending.
That trade-off between Lindis and Violet, Lindis might actually win because Violet's roll has a cooldown, right? So every single time she rolls, she gets an empowered basic attack that's pretty much like a burst. Issue is that we saw Zaniel just drops and came down with an ultimate, granting all of them a very, very big heal and a damage reduction as well. So that is one thing that, Zaniel is really good for, just jumping in, popping by from nowhere, granting that recovery, a burst of recovery, and on top of that, the damage reduction. So that is one thing that maybe the side of a Team Unknown really have to latch on, just basically know about before they actually go into any form of team fights, because the presence of Zaniel will always be there. It's either they have Crash to force Zaniel out of lane.
Oh, well, there's going to be the engagement coming through from NatusVanguard. Whether we see that Zaniel decide to use the port down is going to be the question. It's not needed right now, as NatusVanguard are winning out in terms of damage, but there's going to be the Metamorphosis in retaliation, and they're going to go on through. But there's the Zaniel joining in on the fight. A bit too late to save Lumber, but soon enough to save the rest of the team as they win out, picking up 2 more kills for themselves. And surely this bottom lane tower to follow. They have the damage to just dive on in under. And Zil has been quite an important part for the team comp of Team Unknown. He's been able to pick off key targets. The only problem is that the overall team fight is very much going in favor of NatusVanguard. But we will see Zil go into a 1v3, trying to do what he can. Maybe a bit of misplay there on his behalf as he gets taken down by Clash P and the rest of NatusVanguard who were there. Praetor, meanwhile, in the mid lane, has put a lot of pressure on this tier 2 turret. Clash P probably going to be able to finish that tower off, and they will just roll on out of there. So NatusVanguard, this is the difference we see in kills coming through. They get so much out of it in terms of objectives, and this is what I really felt like yesterday when watching them was their problem. We saw them get so many early kills, but they couldn't quite transition that into objectives, and today it's a completely different statement here as NatusVanguard showing us what they're really made of and bringing it through for that possible third place spot.
Yep, so NatusVanguard definitely, you know, putting up a different show as compared to what we saw them do yesterday. But okay, now it's, you know, it's reaching into the late game. Duckslayer is up, and a lot of towers have been pushed. Total 5 towers down across the map. But at this point in time, what's the difference between, you know, Team Unknown and Meet Your Makers yesterday was that Meet Your Makers knew what they wanted and how they should actually play that mid to late game. Whereas the side of Unknown, what they're basically doing right now is succumbing to whatever the NatusVanguard is going to do, and thus unable to find anything whatsoever.
Yeah, well, there's going to be Ash on the Zephyrs, possibly caught out between 4 members on the side of Team Unknown, but in a similar situation, the Zil will be caught out between Clash P and Fuse. So when it comes to terms of resources, it looks like we have a bit of a disconnect. I was wondering about that Praetor. It did seem a bit off. It looks like he's got some internet issues there, but hopefully that will be fixed in time, because right now it is very important. This is very much the transitionary player that you mentioned, whether NatusVanguard can go and take, per se, the Darkslayer buff and make use of it and continue to push those high ground towers. And if not, I'm sure being a man down will definitely be quite the hindrance, even though they're ahead of Team Unknown. Team Unknown have a chance for comeback as long as they find the pickoffs and when Natus is separated and such.
I mean, just looking at it right now, it is only a mere 5k difference, say 5.6k difference. But although it may be a large one, but down to AOV as a game itself, what really matters most is that late game. If you find a good team fight, basically pick someone off like what, you know, the side of Unknown did on Zephyrs, then enforce a team fight, after which you can easily just will come out on top of the team fight and eventually be able to secure yourself the Duckslayer or the Abyssal Dragon and then push your lead from there. Because to be quite honest, even if your man goes down, like say the Crash goes down in that late game team fight, it doesn't matter because everyone have used that expired all their abilities onto this Crash, and thus he goes down, and your team still has their abilities up, and now Fuse.
Well, Crash going to walk into that bush, and the Lumber and Crash trade out some damage there. Looks like they will be trying to move on in onto Team Unknown. NatusVanguard's going to be the initiators on this one. Zennial in the front line. There's going to be the Zephyrs coming around the side. Meanwhile, they notice that Zil is not a part of this team fight. They're trying to push for what they can, but there's going to be the Metamorphosis is to push them back into the wall, landing the stun as well. L'Oreal, very low under turret, is going to get dived by the Zephyrs. Meanwhile, Zil in chasing down that of the Praetor. I'm not sure if that's the correct target, as Clash P still left alive, very low on HP, but able to dish out the damage necessary to help his team win this team fight. However, here comes Zil back in full health, and there's going to be the retreat from the side of Team Unknown. And it looks like a fairly even trade out overall for each team, I'd say. They both lost 2 members, being their, actually not being their tanks, but for the side of Natus and Team Unknown, that was fairly even. And now we see that Zil probably going to get caught out, as he figured that NatusVanguard were done already, but they are not. They are pushing on through to this top tier tower, this top tier 1 tower. And they will probably make a rotation down to Darkslayer. I'm not sure if the 3 of them can do it, but they may as well start.
Well, I mean, you have a Valor on your team. You have plenty of damage. And on top of that as well, you have Zennial and Lumber that will be able to just tank up and soak up the damage coming through from the Darkslayer. But they might just, They will be getting that Dark Slayer, and now with this buff, they can easily push into base, right? Like I mentioned earlier on, the goal difference isn't huge, right? But if Zil will continue making mistakes like this, I mean, it's a very small mistakes chasing after a target that's not within the team fight itself, and then going way too far, and after which actually getting caught out. It is not a huge mistake, but then in this late game, it is one of those game-breaking ones. So
yeah, you definitely pointed out the what's going on here between Team Unknown and NatusVanguard in terms of target prioritization and positioning. And I think it also goes through to say, we'll hold on to that for maybe end of game talk as we see it possibly closing in here. There's going to be Metamorphosis to open up, but it's going to be the whole team comp of Team Unknown just getting dove upon, and no one on the side of Norris is going to go down in return. They're going through just one by one, cleaning up, starting off with the Lindis and ending with the Zil. That's going to be the ace. That's going to be game number 1 for the side of NatusVanguard, and what a game to see from Natus as opposed to yesterday's game. They're very much cleaned up on their strategies. They look like a very much different team, and if they had played this way yesterday, possibly could have made it through to the grand finals. But either way, it is great to see them in this kind of shape and form.
Well, now the dilemma still stands, right? Whether or not you ban out Zephys or you just ban out Joker again, right? So this is one thing that maybe the side of Unknown have to reconsider coming into this game. But just looking quickly, reflecting this team fight, Metamorphosis use, not a great one. Maybe just to deter them, not thinking that they will actually dive into base. And we see now Blaze, the first one to fall. Lindis cannot create a space whatsoever, and the next would be Arpan. And then now you see almost the entire team is just falling apart because there is no consistent damage, there is no burst whatsoever. And the last, like you mentioned, would be that of Thane. So Thane goes down, and that is the ace, double kill for Clash P, and that is basically the core right there, right? So with that team fight in mind, we mentioned a lot of times that Crash's Metamorphosis is important. Yeah, maybe with the use of Metamorphosis, you are trying to deter your enemies from coming into your base, but then honestly, they really have nothing to lose, right? A turret isn't there. Nothing else is there but your core, right? They will have to fight through all of you in order to get to your core, and they will do it. I mean, they have the goal advantage, they have the damage as well.
Yeah, I think the best use of Metamorphosis, if possible, is to use it for that offensive purpose, because you need to use it and then make use of that small window of opportunity when you have the enemy stunned up. But because defensive should rarely be a reserve purpose and a last minute kind of strat, which is what looked like there. They, as you mentioned, Team Unknown didn't really seem to be so composed throughout the whole game, and this was the downfall when I think what made NatusVanguard themselves shine so much, and why their strategy was pulled off so well, and the fact that Clash P on the Violet could get through to such a strong late game. And it also goes to say the positioning in team fights and such is a part of that compositional misstructure, perhaps, and that when we look at those team fights, even though they traded out evenly prior to that Darkslayer, that is a perfect example of when the side of NatusVanguard would not really necessarily win a team fight, but they'd still get so much more out of it, and overall that is winning the game.
I am, however, actually very, very proud of NatusVanguard. Yesterday's game, I was saying they should put Violet in that bot lane, and in today's game, they actually placed Violet in the bot lane, and we see why. Most marksmen, are placed in that bot lane, and then Violet is one of the strongest ones out there. High burst, yes, you do lack the consistent damage over time or the DPS per se, but you have very, very high burst that can make up for it. Your role is on a relatively short cooldown after all, so you can make full use of it if you really want to. So really, really good players coming out from Clash P. Sorry, I kept calling you a one-trick joker. That is an open apology. But even then, he played spectacularly well in the bottom lane, able to put so much pressure, so much so that the other lanes can as well push, because they don't have to worry whatsoever about the bot lane.
Yep. Well, with that, we'll have to see what composition they put through for this next match, whether Clash P will be allowed to play as Joker or not. it's going to be interesting as we jump on in and with the side for, I believe, Team Unknown, they're going to actually go with the Murad ban. And this is interesting. They didn't need to ban Joker because they could also pick up Joker themselves. But they didn't need to ban Murad because, look, there's going to be the Joker pick at least that I thought they would pick up. And the question is now, while Zephys will probably fall into the hands of NatusVanguard again, but they're going to at least pick up that Violet. There's the likely Zephys, but they're not sure if they want to go Zephys or Zenio, I would imagine. I think it's going to be on that Zephys. It's too good to give up. And you talked about this, whether they would ban out the Zephys. Now, I understand Murad's still in the meta as well, and a great pick, but by doing this, I knew they wouldn't ban Joker because they could just pick up Joker themselves and then deny it from Clash P. I'm just not so sure about that Murad ban, but Evo, the rest of the team comp is falling in within the meta structure.
Yep. Okay, maybe not Pura or Paina.
At least for the side of Team Unknown, I should say.
Yeah, at least.
No, it looks like they're going to go for that of the Crash and the Zenio. Why not? Crash alongside the Zephys is going to be a great front line for them. Last time, I believe they had the Lumber alongside the Zephys, so fills a similar role, whereas you have the knock-up from the Lumber. In this case, you have that Metamorphosis ult as the CC, the AoE CC, in fact, that comes through for them. And I like that Zenio was picked up back on that team. It's a very similar team comp. If they wanted to finish it off in complete, they would have had to pick up the Praetor, but Praetor no longer does leave them to go. So this is a pick I personally have not seen before. So would you like to enlighten us on maybe why they decided to go for it?
The Maganga pick. Well. Okay, I'll be honest with you. So I played AOV during the beta stages, the beta stages. So even before AOV was roughly popular, right, across Southeast Asia. And Maganga previously was a really, really strong hero, right? You have heal that's you're basically a support, right? You have excellent heal. Firstly, you have excellent damage over time because of your poison, and then if you stack your poison up, you have absolutely insane burst as well. But they've obviously tuned Maganga to the extent where you can no longer delete an enemy at 3/4 health. Yes, you used to be able to do that, right? Just delete the enemy. You can no longer do that. But even then, thinking about it, I mean, Alice is still on the table. Alice is an excellent support. Obviously, Alice doesn't have a heal, but you have Zenio on your team already, so you don't really need that heal anymore. You could have picked a more, aggressive mage, per se. Maybe Illumia. Illumia is an aggressive mage, someone that can actually help you out. If not, then Gina. We saw a couple of Ginas before on Natalia, right? To fit into this particular team comp itself, you didn't really have to go for the Maganga. So it does kind of. It makes me puzzled as to why Maganga is chosen over the other mages. Maybe because one of the players there are just so very good at Maganga. But let's take a look at Unknown's team comp. So what they have lined up is Joker, Lumber, Praetor, that of Thane, and Lindis. So it's double ADC comp. I don't know what to feel about this. Joker's probably going to be in the mid lane, and then you have Lindis at the bottom lane. But then, in the previous team comp itself, it's... in the previous game itself, they ran as something very, very similar, but then it cannot out-damage whatever that Violet is putting out or Zephys itself.
Yeah, well, we will have to see just how it plays out as we jump into game number 2 of match 1 between that of NatusVanguard and Team Unknown. Natus taking the first game, and we'll just see how they play this one, especially eyes on that Maganga, as you mentioned, used to be quite toxic. Indeed, and we'll have to see how much poison he can dish out this game, how much burst he's got in the barrel. But with that, looking back at just a reiteration of the Team Unknown comp that you mentioned, that they have the Lindis, Praetor, Lumber, Joker, Thane comp. They have good frontline as well as good backline poke, and of course, I think that the fact with Lindis this time have gone and put in the jungle is a much better decision. Of course, they have the okay, I was going to say, of course, they have the Joker, and I was expecting to look down to the bot lane and see the Joker there, because I figured, well, why not match ADC against ADC? But instead, they just decided we don't want our Lindis to get so horrifically harassed by Clash P on that Violet, so instead we'll put her in the jungle. How do you feel about this?
Well, Lindis jungle is an acceptable pick, right? But you do not scale as well as, say, the other assassins, right? You have your burst, granted you can clear fast like we are seeing here, but you just do not have the burst like that, I'll say Zephys or Murad in general, and Eulos will be going in.
Yep, just taking a bit of poke there, and it looks like I'm more worried about the bot lane coming out from Team Unknown. You've got the Thane and the Lumber. Of course, they'll be able to tank up a lot more damage against the Violet, but Violet is one of those heroes you mentioned, doesn't have consistent damage, but has high burst damage, and in that, creates this very, I guess, it wouldn't be called consistent, but you have that pressure in lane, and it's that poke that you can apply to the enemy team that is so reliable. And look at this, NatusVanguard more than likely going to be able to take away the first Abyssal Dragon, so doing very good in the early game once again, but not only that, they deterred Team Unknown away from doing it themselves, and I feel like for Team Unknown to not let the side of NatusVanguard get into such a comfortable position as last time, they need to be more willing to make those risky plays in the early game and contest for such objectives.
Yep, and this is what I'm talking about. Lindis would never be able to just say, oh, let's start the Abyssal Dragon. I've got enough damage to take it down, and as long as you guys aid me. Unlike the other assassins or the other junglers out there, where they can just easily start big objectives like the Dark Slayer, like the Abyssal Dragon, without taking all too much damage. And this is the clear difference between both of the team comp, right? At this point in time, the side of NatusVanguard, they have Clash P on that Violet. They have a Crash just babysitting Clash P as well. So just very tanky, very good comp right at the bottom lane. And in the top lane, you have Zenil, who can basically just roam around the map. And there's really nothing that Joker can possibly do as well, because you know, as an ADC, Joker can never be able to poke down a tank.
But somehow, it's going to be the side of Team Unknown. Lumber, the first blood onto that Clash P, and the turnaround onto the Crash. They get 2 for 0, and that is a great trade out for the side of Team Unknown. Although we did see this previously happen in the first game, they get these kills in the early, and they get these trade outs, but it really doesn't mean so much for the side of Unknown. I won't say it means nothing, but it just isn't as much as what NatusVanguard can squeeze out of such kills and the opportunities they're given off the back of them. So I'm not too sure how that fight broke down. It looked like, obviously, Clash P on the Violet and Crash got caught out while roaming up to mid lane, and just bad time, bad place. But look at this. The Praetor roam to the top side, and this is what I want to see from Team Unknown. They are being more aggressive and more served with their plays and putting their resources to better use. Now, the second thing I would expect is if they could rotate and stop this Abyssal Dragon take, but NatusVanguard are very much onto it. We mentioned this before. They are not a team to slip up on such early game chances and opportunities, such as the Abyssal Dragon, and they will be the ones to take it. But I'm not sure about this engage coming through by Zephys. He will dive in onto that Lindis on the backline, but she's able to find the safety of her tower. Meanwhile, Thane, taking up all the damage, will be the one to go down as the sacrifice for Team Unknown. And Joker has taken the time to put a tiny bit of pressure on the mid lane tower. So not a bad move at all, but it looks like he is going to go very low on HP himself and will be the next to fall.
Yep, and so we are seeing right now, besides that team fight that went very, very well for the side of NatusVanguard, they were able to secure an objective. On top of that, possibly this mid-tier turret, Zenil going very, very low, will be able to get away, and the bottom tier turret as well with Clash and with Crashed and Clash P on it, it will be falling very, very soon. So this Maganga mid lane, I'm still kind of shaky. I do not know what to think about it. I mean, at this point, he hasn't quite shown anything just yet, but just to linger around in that of the mid lane, he do not have a high burst of damage after all. So I think what he can do is provide the support.
Might see Maganga come into play here, but the team doesn't even need him. NatusVanguard cleaning up that Thane, who just dived on in too deep, gets punished by that of the Crash ultimate coming on through the stun, and then the rest of the team of the damage. But it might be return in terms of tanks. There's going to be the Crash falling to that of Praetor, but it looks like Lumber, a bit of miscommunication without his team, isn't really going to get much done. However, he might get the bait coming in through, whether Zephys and Maganga have the burst damage to take them down, and it looks like they'll at least pick up the Linders. They follow through the triple kill, and this is why you don't hand over the Zephys. And it was a pick that you mentioned at the end of last game. You were very much worried about whether NatusVanguard would give that or get that pick onto Ash again, and they did. And we see the strength of it, because I think in that last game, when it came to key damage output, you really had to give it to Zephys in the front line and Clash P on that Violet in the
Well, yeah, and now NatusVanguard a third Abyssal Dragon for themselves. So I think what Maganga really provided there is, I guess it's slow poke from Maganga. The damage over time, I guess. I mean, he didn't quite use his ultimate detonation at all. He didn't pick up any kills for himself. All he did was the assist.
Yep, and it looks like Joker might get caught out, but instead it's going to be the turnaround onto that Zenial, and Clash P should be able to roll away from that. I don't think there will be any trade out coming through from Natus, but you can see in the second game, at least Team Unknown have slowed the progression of NatusVanguard in terms of that snowball happening. And I think NatusVanguard's starting to struggle a bit more, in fact, of pulling off such a clean game as they did last time.
Yep, they might be, but at this point, I mean, looking at mid lane itself, NatusVanguard is now actually rotating as a team, so it's looking very, very well for them. I mean, they are playing like how they should be, so I'm not all too worried for them at this point, as long as they, you know, the side of Team Unknown do not get pickoffs, because pickoffs are the most dangerous thing for NatusVanguard right now. Their team comp really must work as a whole, right? You have the Crash cannot die first. You have Maganga with insane healing, so he cannot go down first as well.
Okay, but it's going to be up to Team Unknown to try and initiate. This is coming on through, though, as retaliation from NatusVanguard. The Crash actually able to turn around that baited fight, and they managed to pick up 3 kills for themselves, following through onto that Lumber. I don't think they have the damage to take him down under tower, but they could do for Praetor, forcing him to blink out of there, and they might give up that tier 2 mid tower. Lumber still in the front line. It knows he can tank up a fair bit more, and is trying to just make sure that, at least this is what I see from Team Unknown, they're not giving up the fights and objectives so easily. There's the turnaround. They pick up both that of the Zenial and the Violet, and they're following through, trying to get the Crash. I think they'll be able to do so in the end, but no, Crash makes it back to the hill next to his tower. And interesting enough, they went for a bit of a greedy play. You could call it greedy, you could call it risk, but Zephys on the side of NatusVanguard actually started up that Darkslayer over meanwhile, whereas they could have put their attention to that middle tier 2 tower, and then as a team rotate to the Darkslayer. And I think this is what you said. NatusVanguard, they're looking good because they're sticking through as a team, but it's these moments where they get caught out not as a full team and not at their full strength that is making them start to lose this game.
Honestly, in that particular team fight, what really happened then was that Maganga just went down really for nothing. I mean, he wasn't part of the team fight really at all, and when he was part of it, he just dies anyways, right? Because he didn't have the burst. Firstly, granted, you can heal from the back lines, but if we are going to give you so much resources in that of the mid lane, I do not just expect you to heal. I want your damage. I want your contribution to the team, if at all. I mean, at that point, NatusVanguard was actually winning as well, but they had to go in for the greedy plays. They had to go in for the second tier mid turret.
Well, it looks like a Team Unknown with the Darkslayer buff are going to go in. That's a great use of the Metamorphosis to keep half the team off and deter them from this team fight, knowing that Valor is in the mid lane. Meanwhile, they've got Zephyrus up in top, so a 3v5 situation in terms of resources very much working out for them. Clash P will be able to take that away. Now needs to try and find the safety of the Zephyrus, otherwise it's going to be all but doom for them, and there's going to be the engagement. Zenial jumping on through, but not enough to save that of Clash P. Joker already scaling into that late game, but he still is fairly squishy. However, Zenial not able to find the kill and will get turned on by the rest of Team Unknown. So a very back and forth situation, but the jump over wall might be enough to save him. The question is, will he get caught out by any more CC? And no, he finds his safety with the rest of his team in his own jungle. So it is overall, I would say that's a win for NatusVanguard. They traded out one tower, and that being the tier 1 tower for the high ground tower in the mid lane from the side of Team Unknown.
Well, it is a good trade out, right? You lose a life, you lose 2 to open up the entire base. It is definitely a very, very good trade out for the side of NatusVanguard. But if they are going to continue with plays like that, and trade off rather than pick off. I mean, there is a big difference, right? Where you actually go in for the turret and then your tower, and then you're able to side, it's fully exposed. So if NatusVanguard do not take care of the mid lane at all, or rather the side of Team Unknown do not take care of the mid lane at all, what will happen then is that NatusVanguard will be able to just push through into the game. Whereas if they are able to,
are they really going to? Okay, Team Unknown going for the win. Merciless do not want to allow Zephyrus that free pause. They're going to continue pushing on him and get the mid tower. And they need to be careful here. NatusVanguard do have their respawns now coming out of base. And I think are going to be, as you said, they didn't lose out completely. They didn't lose the Abyssal Dragon, but they very much lost that fight. And in consequence has put them a step back away from that victory. And you can see Zenial getting bursted down in the front line, no backup from the rest of the team to go through. And you just talked about this Maganga not really having such an impact in the game, and I would agree, so that I can't see it myself. And it is a bit of a shame when NatusVanguard, once again, it seems like the usual situation. We see them have such a great early game, but the late game is really where it falls apart. Of course, this time it can be a bit more attributed to that of the AFK coming through on the Zephyrus, but we'll have to see how they play around it. Anyway, they go in with the Metamorphosis. There's going to be Zephyrus overweight in onto the backline, but so much damage getting soaked up onto the front line, I should say. That's Crash. Meanwhile, holding off the rest of Team Unknown, they are able to get one pick for themselves, trying to push on through. Zephyrus can't find the Joker as he's able to roll back from that, and the Lindis as well, keeping that distance, but does get caught out. And NatusVanguard are doing such a systematical push one by one and breaking down Team Unknown. It's only the Praetor left standing, and they only lost one man for this, and they're going to continue pushing on through for the win. That Zenial was actually able to rejoin the team because of the ultimate, and they get the game no matter what. They just pull on through, and NatusVanguard proving me wrong that they weren't going to fall apart. They got in when it was clutch.
That game. I had thought that Unknown would have made a comeback. I mean, just look at this, right? So Unknown is the one with the pressure, with the poke, and then out of nowhere comes a Metamorphosis because of Praetor's A. And then you see Zephyrus jump into the middle, tries to delete one. Shashank Jake is already down, not up at all yet. So this is a 4v5 that we are witnessing. Clash P very low. Maganga is also there. It's just being there. I'm not sure for what, but he's just there. And then you have Ash just in the front line, putting so much work. Lumber with the bad move goes in. And then you see Ash goes in once again, pick up someone, and the next target will be that of Joker. Arpan, very good aid, deleting or rather slowing everyone down. But it is not enough. Shashank Jake is still at full health. With that tank there, they just easily push the core down, and there was nothing whatsoever that Arpan on that Praetor could do. So that push was an interesting one, firstly, and it is spectacular indeed.
Well, you've got to give it to what the side of NatusVanguard did right, and what that of Team Unknown did wrong. Now, what NatusVanguard did right, they practically ignored the tanks once they took down the Fame. They knew, okay, now we're not going to get charged back at least. Now we can dive onto the enemy team safely, and they don't have so much CC to push us off. Of course, I mentioned how the Joker was able to keep his distance for a while, but the Lindis was the one to get caught out instead. And because of that, they just went on through to lean them one by one. With the man advantage, even after being 4 versus 5. And it's just such a great play coming out from Natus. But when you look at what Team Unknown did wrong, I think is a lot in terms of positioning after that. There wasn't too much they could do. But if the Praetor was running back through the mid lane, he could have at least put down some return damage when a few of them were low. Right before the Zenial joined in, I believe, and healed them up. Could have been able to land some of that damage. He's trying to do so over from the jungle side and over the walls there, but it is just too far away, and he wasn't able to connect with that, and instead was the last one left standing, and was a single Praetor going to do against a full late game team comp of Natus, especially when there's OP Maganga there. Okay, no trash talk on the Maganga, but at least it didn't fail. It came through in the end, but I think you rarely had to give it through to. It wasn't so much the comp in some sense. The comp, they could have obviously had a better pick for the mid lane, but they went and they played it so well. Is that positioning and the engagement, especially in that last fight, off the back of the Metamorphosis from the Crash.